Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make mint chocolate whoopie pies. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, Sam here, and today I am so excited to be sharing another carefully tested, well-researched, and perfected recipe. This is a fun twist on the classic whoopie pies or gobs that I shared probably a year ago now. We are going to be making a dark chocolate cookie, soft cookie shell, and a mint white chocolate filling. I kind of modeled these a little bit after peppermint bark because I wanted to emulate those flavors. I think it's a great flavor combo. It's perfect for this time of year. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the very first thing you want to do is get your oven preheating to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, this sounds very hot. Yes, it is supposed to be that temperature. It's going to take a while for your oven to get to that temperature, so go ahead and start it right now. Next, let's move over to our mixing bowl. And here we are going to combine 1 cup of granulated sugar, and I also have 1/3 cup of softened unsalted butter. And 1/3 cup is 5 1/3 tablespoons. In case you were curious, it should tell you that right on the wrapper though. You could of course make today's recipe using a stand mixer, but today I'm going to be using an electric hand mixer. And we'll just cream together the butter and sugar until they're really well combined. Now, it's going to kind of resist a little bit because we're not using that much butter at this point. Just keep mixing. You want to make sure that butter's really well creamed and the sugar and butter are really well incorporated. All right, this looks pretty good. So next we are going to add 1 large egg and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. We'll stir these ingredients in until everything is nice like a bind. You want to get that egg nicely mixed in there. All right, unlike my classic whoopie pie recipe, instead of using buttermilk, today we are going to be using sour cream. You'll need 3/4 cup of full-fat sour cream. We'll stir this in with our sugar and our other wet ingredients. All right, we'll set this aside, and now in a separate bowl, we're going to combine our dry ingredients, starting with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Definitely could have used a larger bowl, but we're gonna make this work. Now, along with the flour, you're going to be using 1/2 cup of dark cocoa powder. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to emulate the flavors of peppermint bark, which uses a dark chocolate. So this is dark chocolate cocoa powder, which you can usually find right next to the regular cocoa powder. If you can't find it, you can use Dutch processed cocoa powder instead. We'll also be adding 1 teaspoon of baking soda, just 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We'll whisk these together as well as we can in our little bowl. And before we go any further, there's 1 more ingredient that you need. We are going to be using 1/2 cup of water, but it needs to be hot water. You want this water to be really, really hot, like steaming hot, or even boiling. You can bring it to a boil before you add it, which would also be great. Now, it's so important that you use hot water because what this does is it's going to react with the cocoa powder, kind of the wrong word. It's going to bloom the cocoa powder. So there is a reaction. What this is going to do is it's going to bring out those deep, rich chocolate flavors. It's going to just make these whoopie pies even better. So you want to use really hot water. Now I have my wet ingredients, my dry ingredients, and my hot water. So I'm going to just start by stirring in about 1/3 of my dry ingredients. And I'm doing this by hand at this point and using a spatula to fold this in until it's not even mostly combined, until the flour is starting to become incorporated. And then I'll take that hot water, and I'm just gonna add about 1/2 of the hot water and stir that in. Once that's mostly combined, I'll add about another 1/3 of my dry ingredients. We're just gonna repeat this until I've added all of the water, which I've added all of it now. And then all of the dry ingredients. Now you don't want to overdo it with this batter, which is why I'm doing this by hand at this point, but you do want it to be smooth and nicely combined. This is looking pretty good. All right, now grab yourself a baking sheet, and I like to use one that's lined with parchment paper just because it makes cleanup so much easier. And we are going to start portioning out this cookie dough. It's kind of more like a cake batter, but our whoopie pie batter. Now you are going to want to use a heaping or rounded tablespoon of batter, and we're gonna drop these at least 2 inches apart because they are going to spread a little bit in the oven. Now we'll take these over to our 450-degree Fahrenheit oven, and they're only going to need to bake for about 5 minutes. You don't want to overbake them or they're going to end up being dry and crumbly, and you want them to be nice and soft and moist inside. Now these are really hot when they come out of the oven. You can always lightly tap them and make sure that the top springs back to the touch. That way you can tell they're fully baked, but usually you can tell by eyeballing them. If there are any little cracks on the surface, they should look pretty dry. Now these cookie shells need to cool completely before you can fill them, but they're gonna cool pretty fast. So we can go ahead and start making our white chocolate peppermint filling, which it's just so good. You're gonna love it. And you're going to need to start with 6 ounces of white chocolate. You can use white chocolate chips, but for best flavor, I really recommend using a bar chocolate that you enjoy eating. I tend to like Ghirardelli, so that's what I'm using today. Now I have gone ahead and melted this, and this is so important. You need to make sure that your white chocolate has completely cooled before you start adding it to your frosting. Now this is not too hot, but I can still feel some warmth if I hold my hand at the bottom of the bowl. So I'm gonna set it aside and let it cool a little bit more. Now while that's cooling, I am going to take my butter, and you need 2 sticks of softened unsalted butter. I'm just going to use my mixer and cream this butter until it's nice and smooth and creamy. All right, let's check on our white chocolate one more time. And I have to stress this, it must not feel warm to the touch. It should not have begun to re-solidify. That'll give you other problems, but if it's warm, it's going to end up melting your chocolate, melting your butter, melting your sugar, and you're gonna have a mess on your hands. So mine feels completely cool to the touch. So I am going to gradually add this to my butter with my mixer on low speed. Kind of hard to do this with one hand, so I'm just gonna drizzle it in a couple different parts. And as you can see, my butter is not melting. Everything is coming together really nicely, so you can tell that our chocolate was at the right temperature. Now, once we've added all of our chocolate to our butter and we have a nice smooth mixture, we can add our powdered sugar. And today's recipe only uses 2 cups of powdered sugar, which is pretty good for a frosting. We'll stir that in until it's completely combined. Now for flavor, we're going to be adding just a pinch of salt. This is an 1/8 teaspoon of table salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. For the filling, I'm using a clear vanilla extract just because I don't want to color it any more yellow than it's already going to be. So this is clear vanilla, but you can use regular. It doesn't color it that much. And I'm also adding 1/4 teaspoon of peppermint extract. Now this is going to seem like a really small amount. It is a small amount. Peppermint extract is really potent. I encourage you to, after you've mixed everything together, taste it, and if you feel like you need more, add more, but just add an additional 1/8 teaspoon at a time. Let's go ahead and mix everything together. Finally, because I want this frosting to be really nice and light, I'm going to add just a tablespoon of heavy cream and whip that in for about 10 to 15 seconds. This is looking beautiful, so let's go ahead and grab our cookies, which should be nice and cool at this point. Before we go any further, we're going to want to pair these off because we're making sandwiches, so you want to find shells that are pretty much the same size. And for our filling, you can really just drop it by the spoonful into the shells, or you can scoop it with a cookie scoop and drop it on there. I want mine to look a little bit more uniform, so I'm just going to transfer this filling to a piping bag. And try not to make a mess. We're just gonna pretend that never happened. I'll just snip off the end with my scissors, and we'll go ahead and put as much filling as you want in each sandwich. Now today I am serving these mint chocolate whoopie pies just as they are, just as you see them. But if you want to dress them up a little bit more, like I've done in my photos, you can drizzle them with a little bit of melted chocolate. You can sprinkle them with a little bit of crushed peppermint. Do that just before serving because the peppermint will bleed if it's stored in the refrigerator. But they're very easy to decorate and dress up, but they're perfect plain as well. I hope you guys enjoyed today's super easy recipe. If you tried this one out, please let me know what you think. I always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.